Hi everybody, welcome to this week's Fine Talk. Ross and I are going to be talking about what the financial modelling of dental practices is going to look like when we get back to work. How the increased costs and an increased time to deliver dentistry are actually going to have a significant effect on the business model itself, and some of the changes you might need to think about making. Ross has developed this in partnership with our accountancy business Hive. So they've done all the modelling. So if you want any further questions, they're probably the best guys to speak to about this. But yeah, Ross, do you want to take us away? This is going to be a brief video, but it's really important that you start thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, thank you. The team at Hive have built the engine behind this, and what we were kind of all assimilating was the rhetoric behind, the narrative that things are going to be different post-COVID when we reopen. Are we going to be doing emergencies only, and what's the financial impact going to be? And we know people are aware about it, but we wanted to kind of articulate in slightly better format, kind of unequivocally and without contest. Well, what are the numbers going to be? So yeah, the team have built this engine, and what we want to show you, I suppose, is, in the first instance, we wanted to input some of the variables to show which ones have the greater impact. So I'd emphasize that these are the variables that are considered in isolation. The first ones we thought were important were, what happens if you're going to have open longer hours? What's going to happen if the revenue isn't at pre-COVID levels? What happens if your PPE, not what happens if your PPE increases the cost, how much do the PPE increase costs? So very interesting kind of outcome. I didn't preordain these when we were inputting those, but one of the bigger factors is, if revenue is less than 80%, we're really seeing quite a deficit there in the practice. Now, obviously, you can kind of balance the books here by, the principal not taking out any drawings, which we're kind of okay in the short term, but in the long term, there's, that's not sustainable. You've essentially got a free worker in the business. That's not a business, in our opinion. So quite a deep deficit you can see there if revenue's only at 60%.
So Ross, when the Times were saying that 20% of dental practices are going to close and figures like that, is this the reason that, like you say, you may be able to survive by just not drawing any cash from it, but it's not in any way a kind of sustainable business model to operate in the same way as before?
Possibly, but I'm not really convinced the Times will have done the modelling that we've done to articulate this. Yes, we've come up with some, very specific examples. This is a 750k practice. We've had to make a few assumptions, but not unreasonable assumptions behind the scenes. I think, that when the Times are saying 20% of practices shut, that is rhetoric, but actually, I'd probably agree with it. Maybe they did do the modelling, I don't know. But, this is black, coloured in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, with this, when we started talking about putting this modelling down, we were definitely there's some real key areas of concern. So a big one, which we'll be talking about over the next few weeks, is obviously NHS practices, because what do you do there with the increased cost base? Because there wasn't much profit there. And another big question mark is, how do you deliver hygiene? Because again, it wasn't historically very profitable. So do you think... Yeah.
In fairness, I think there's a question before that, because the furlough scheme, yes, the furlough scheme has been extended and that financial support is supporting practices, but we're not quite sure what happens on the 1st of July yet. We're not quite sure whether the practices are going to have to make a contribution. So actually the next model I was looking at, because it was, real hot topic last week, is, I'll just skip on to the next one, is what happens if you can only open and do emergencies only? We're estimating perhaps that might generate 20% of the revenue that you might get to. But if that emergencies only system pervades into past 1st of July, when possibly the furlough scheme gets reduced and you're having to bear some burden there, it's really not turning out pretty at all.
So I mean, to be perfectly clear, you can't just do that. The business doesn't sustain if you're only servicing emergencies.
I mean, you'll get away with it for a month or two, but you can kind of see how the line kind of declines down the page. Again, you're probably perfectly possible if you don't get paid for it as well as the principal.
Yeah, I think there'll probably be a few people watching this that don't see that as a sustainable thing to not get paid for their hard work.
No, indeed. So just to kind of skip back, the first illustration I showed you was all the variables in isolation, kind of comparing them each one side by side. But of course, that's probably not going to be the reality. We're probably going to have to stack a few together. So stacked a few together here. Again, every single graph I'm painting seems to be a sharply negative line down the page. But I guess that's the mood behind the message, really.
So what do practices have to do then to counter this?
As a very simple question, and requires probably a very complex answer.
Yeah.
If I can answer it as simply as I can, I don't see that there will be a middle ground that is sustainable anyway. I think practices are going to have to be better, more sophisticated. They're going to have to better articulate their proposition in the marketplace. They are going to have to open longer. They are going to have greater throughput of patients, essentially, I believe. It's the conclusion I'm making. It's the only conclusion I can make when I kind of pull all the logic together.
Yeah, we've said it quite a bit that actually your business proposition has to be so tightly aligned with your financial model going forward, which frankly you just didn't really see in dentistry, because you could just sell a couple of implants that month and make a load of money. That's not really going to be an option going forward. I think there's going to be chaos caused by whatever happens with the NHS, and I think that's a huge opportunity for someone who's actually looking to, maybe just drop the price of checkups to £20, make it really affordable. But then your model has to be so tight so you're actually making profit in the other areas as well. So there's still tons of opportunity, but you're not going to get it by being a middle of the road dentist doing what we used to do, because you can't basically now.
No, and I'd emphasize that's not about the dentistry you're doing, it's about the business that you're running. It's all indications are your revenue is going to have to be higher than what it was pre-COVID to make the books kind of add up.
Yeah, so historically pre-COVID it was around about £1 million of revenue was when you'd start to get really good economies of scale. And working towards a kind of 15-20% EBITDA, really nice profit there. Now it's looking more towards, Ross, you're saying about 1.5? I mean, it's early to know because we don't exactly know what it looks like, but it is something around there.
Yeah, well, the number's gone up from 1 million. That's the kind of the clear message. It's, somewhere between 1.2, 1.5. If you want to have a business that generates a profit after you get paid, if you are perfectly happy essentially having a paid for salary, but having all the the hassle and the risk of owning a practice, then I'm sure that will probably be okay and that will continue. But it's just a bit kind of awkward in one way. I'm not a huge fan of kind of taking on all the risk for being paid a market rate as a clinician.
Yeah, we've heard a couple of things that some associates are thinking of buying practices so they can kind of buy their job in a sense. That's, to us, a kind of really risky, kind of terrifying thing to do. It's so much more about business going forward and how you run the business and how you are actually creating a model that does create profit for you. Because there wasn't really there was risk in the market historically, but we couldn't see it at the time. We didn't know what the risk was, but now it's
pricing it in.
Yes, that's it. So now it's there. We know what it is. So yeah, don't take the numbers lightly, essentially.
No, I'll show you just one final piece of the model. So a lot of debate going on, as far as I understand, about having to put spacing in between AGP treatments. So again, any number of assumptions made, but I've tried to consider what kind of spacing that might be relevant there. And essentially it's going to mean extended opening hours or ineffective operations, I suppose, in a practice, whether that's greater staffing because you're having to open extended hours, or whether you've got staff resource there that's essentially doing nothing for proportions of the time. So we've built this into the engine. I think the other part of the conclusion of this, which probably isn't displayable on the page, again, we've got kind of all the adverse cash flows that can occur from possible spacings. But the other conclusion, which a graph can't display to you, is that, you know, the clinicians, the associates, essentially their pay rate is going to go down because they're going to have to be there for a longer period of time to generate the same amount of revenue for themselves. So there's an effective pay decrease waiting to occur. You know, possibly write up some notes in between patients, or maybe make some consultations, but there's inevitably going to be some form of wastage.
So that's all pretty doom and gloom. Give us something positive, Ross.
Well, I think disruptive times in the industry, in any industry, you know, they say necessity is the mother of invention. I think there's great possibilities here for good businesses to be better businesses. You know, the good ones will thrive, and you know, the bad ones will slowly wither. But I heard a great quote the other day. It said, stability breeds instability. And so we had a nice stable environment pre-COVID, and I think it created a lot of we call them kind of lazy practices, Dan. That's not necessarily meant in a derogatory way. It's just businesses can sometimes occur where there shouldn't be businesses.
Yeah.
So I think the good businesses will thrive, or the businesses that want to be good business and put in that effort now, you know, really will be quite successful. You know, the revenue's not going to disappear. I think when we say revenue is going to drop by 20% across the course, not every single practice is going to decrease by 20%. There'll be some that decrease by 40 or 50%, but some will increase.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I do think there's hope there. It's still a good industry to be in, but it is really, we were talking about it in terms of associates the other day, but it is choosing now more than ever. It's really choose what you want to be. Do you want to be a business owner? Do you want to be a dentist? Do you want to be a high performing dentist? You can't have your cake and eat it too, I think is the message loud and clear. It's you know, are you in or are you out type thing.
Yep. Well, thank you, Dan. I can do any modelling for any practices that are interested. So make contact.
Great stuff. Cheers, Ross.
Thank you.
Thanks.